iPad 1 only had 256 megs of total memory, and you only got about less than really 100 megs of that in the browser. In iPad 2, you got 500, so you basically triple the amount of memory you can work with, and that makes everything smoother and like the painting's better, and the iPad 2 is just a great app platform, and the Playbook is as well. Is going to be. It's coming out next week. We got a preview, and it's awesome. It's great. Yep.
So if you want our web app to access camera and geolocation and accelerometers, what do we need to know about each of the different devices or anything else that might be special to it?
Sure. So the question, if we want our web app to access geolocation, camera, and what was the third one? Accelerometer, what do we need to know? Well, the good thing about web standards is that once they're a standard, they're the same everywhere. So geolocation actually is just navigator.geolocation, and it gives you a language, standard longitude and latitude. Latitude and longitude. Latitude. Same for accelerometer, so that's standardized, so it's a W3C. So Apple basically modeled it on the W3C. Camera access today is only available on Honeycomb as far as I've seen, and basically it's just an option to the input type equals file. So instead of prompting you for a file, you can prompt you for a photo upload. Today, if you want a cross-platform photo or photo capture, you can't do it in a web page. You've got to wrap your app in a native shell and access a standard API. And that one of the things that the PhoneGap and the NimbleKit guys do is give you one API that works across platforms, so you don't have to recompile. Well, you do have to recompile, but you don't have to rewrite. Yep.
Is HTML frozen or is it still evolving?
Is HTML frozen or is it still evolving? So I have another presentation on the HTML5 standards process. So there are parts that are pretty stable. There are parts that did my sound just go out? No. Okay. There are parts that are stable. There are parts that are not. The core HTML5 spec is stable. The Canvas spec is stable. SVG has been fully spec'd for a long time. WebSockets, there's currently a disagreement about. WebSQL, Firefox, Mozilla doesn't ever plan to implement, but local storage is pretty solid. Cache manifest is solid. Core semantic tags is solid. CSS pretty solid. The gradient syntax just got standardized. One of the reasons to use frameworks is to abstract away is it done or not. Because if stuff moves underneath you, at least you have a consistent API. But it's pretty done. Give or take. It's pretty done.
Does it smell like the Rev 1, 2, 3, 4, and then jumps to HTML6 or something?
No, oh boy, the history. So there was version 1. It was first just HTML, unversioned, and there were 20 tags in the first version of HTML. And that's all you could use, and there was no CSS, and there was no JavaScript. Then HTML2 came out pretty quickly afterwards. I think in 94, HTML3 came out in 95, HTML4 came out in 97, and then they said, no more HTML. We're switching over to XHTML. It's all going to be XML. That went on for 5 years. It didn't go anywhere. And then they switched back and said, no, we're going to get back on the practical browser technologies route that we had in the 90s. It's going to be called HTML5. Then they basically, Ian Hickson got so sick, who's the chief editor of both tracks, was so sick of people having this argument, is HTML5 done or not, that he said, well, we're just not going to version it anymore. It's just going to, stuff's, when it's ready, it's going to be ready, and it's going to be implemented in browsers, and we're not going to have this argument over, is HTML5 ready or not. There's parts of it that are ready and parts of it that are less ready. And we try and stay away from the parts that aren't ready. Yep. Oh, I should give probably someone else a little bit of a chance. Yep.
So my experience is that the amount of cross-browser breakage is much lower
Yep.
than the grading or charts.
Yep.
For example, never mind the complicated stuff.
Yeah.
Just something simple like multi-touch on iOS, mobile Safari works great. On the iPhone up to 5.
Yep.
On Android, the Android browser before Honeycomb, not so much.
Yep.
So there goes your ability to build a native like cross-platform, full-featured application for something as simple as multi-touch, which is quite, quite hard to touch.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of where, I don't want every answer to be use a framework. But this is sort of where frameworks can help, which is if the abstractions.
Because the multi-touch events are not passed.
I know we don't have a multi-touch event. You can't.
So there's no framework that can compensate for that.
Exactly, which is that if you want to build. So the question was, iOS in the web, in its web view, has pretty rich multi-touch. You can basically track, I think up to 5 or up to 10 separate touches independently. Android, you just get a simple, is it a pinch or not? You can't track multiple touches with the same granularity. So if you are doing mobile web, you have to target the lowest common denominator. A framework like Sencha will only support 2 concurrent touches, so we don't pass through any more touches than that. So in a way that we sort of have done the work for you beforehand, which is if you can't do it with our API, it's either not cross-browser, it's not cross-browser, basically. Yep.
I just wanted to make a comment, which is if you are going to test an application on the phone, make sure you have a bunch of applications open, because the memory on the iOS for a web app is about 80 before it starts getting problems.
Yeah, so the comment was make sure that if you're testing your iPhone web app, that you're doing with other background apps, getting notifications because, you should just stress test your iOS app because there are memory limitations and storage limitations in web apps that are different than native apps. Yep. Okay.
So all of the focus on mobile apps and all of the new libraries, attention being on mobile apps, what do you think the desktop HTML5?
Sure.
Would it become more like mobile? Sencha perhaps at some point be able to use Chrome app right now already?
Yeah. So the question was, so that's great about mobile, but what about desktop? Will people use frameworks to build HTML5 on the desktop as well? Well, people are already. I mean, so if you're building a serious enterprise app today, you're using XJS or you're using Dojo or MooTools or YUI or you're using some kind of framework to build anything complicated. Relatively few people are building complex, rich experiences from scratch, or they're using something like Flex. Yep. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Basically, you're saying, this is going to be mobile app development.
Yep.
It's not the present loader, should I do that? But now I have my desktop app and I have my mobile app.
Yep.
See that someone should prefer the same technologies within the server, big client, where is that?
Yeah. So the question is, are you going to say the same sort of programming model on the desktop, or use it as you are with mobile with fat client? Thin server. I think so. Yeah, I think that there's lots of disconnected use cases, and the responsiveness that you can get from an AJAX-driven app is just so much better than you can from a page-driven app. That the world's moving there now. There's a huge legacy of page-oriented applications, for want of a better word, that are still there. And entrenched with content management systems. Content management systems assume, a document that you're going to put your content into a content hierarchy, and it's generally so. I think there's a new generation of content management systems that need to be built that are more about serving content into single-page apps on the desktop rather than page-oriented apps. And I actually think that's going to disrupt a whole bunch of stuff on the desktop because so much of the supporting web infrastructure on the desktop assumes that people are pulling new pages all the time from analytics. Like, think about the analytics. Almost all the analytics are page-oriented. Like, is there any AJAX-compatible analytics package out there at all? There isn't. So if anyone wants a new startup, there you go. Free idea. I promise I won't sue you. That was my idea. I gave him $2,000. That's for Bruce Seglia, all you guys. Search engines. Oh, yeah. So that's a horrible hack today, right? Which is like you've got to basically produce, if you have an Ajax app, then you've got to produce this crazy shadow site that's also crawlable. And there's some work that's been done on Ajax crawlability, but really that's in its embryonic stage. You need to be able to say, like, this is my object hierarchy here, this is my database, here's my schema, here's how you crawl it. And by the way, I have to trust that you're Google and not some weird guy like trying to crawl all my data. So that's not fixed either. This is the start of like the next generation of web technologies, because everything is going to applications on the desktop eventually, and also on mobile. But mobile's leading the way because you can actually build this stuff on mobile first to a critical mass. And I think like this is going to disrupt a whole bunch of companies that are in. It's a web server. It serves pages. They're documents. They're not anymore. They're not anymore. You know, they're not. You got to rethink your assumptions about all the surrounding infrastructure. But that's a rant for a different day. But yeah, no, we are. I really do believe that this is. It's the start of like the next generation of web techs. And one of the reasons I went to Sencha was I was like, there's now state on the client. It can do really crazy data stuff. You don't even have to have a network connection once you get the initial download and still have a viable experience. You've got, yeah. So I think this is a very exciting time to be in web technologies. Yep.
So are all the frameworks you talked about basically licensing on the same terms, or is that still?
Licensing. So we have two licenses. We've got it for Sencha Touch. It's GPL or a free commercial license. We think that it's useful, but it's not. We don't want to make money on the license. jQuery is permissive. Or jQuery Mobile is permissive license. JQ Touch is MIT. I think jQuery Mobile is BSD. MIT. No one's got a really weird license as far as I know. So, yeah.
Okay. So they're all basically support-based.
Well, jQuery, doesn't even have, is not, jQuery core is like 200 function calls, right? It's tiny, so it doesn't have a company. It's got a person. So, John Resig is the only full-time committer to jQuery. And then, but there's some committers from Adobe. There's some Microsoft is sponsoring some jQuery development. Dojo has IBM funding and support for a while. Yahoo obviously funds Yahoo User Interface Group. MooTools isn't really funded by anyone as far as I know, so that's sort of lagged a bit. On the mobile side, so we fund JQ Touch. We also fund Sencha Touch. We've got commercial support offerings. We make money from training. We also have tools, so a drag and drop builder, and an animation tool and a bunch of other things. And so that's how we make money. And we're pretty big. We've got about 55 people. We're trying to grow to 100 this year. Lots of people are using our stuff. So yeah, that's where we are. Yep.
So can you include other JavaScript libraries if you're using Sencha? I'm particularly interested in, there are some available for doing MVC on the client side.
Yep.
And is that something you can use alongside with Sencha?
So the value of Sencha is that everything works together. So we have an MVC package for Sencha Touch as well. The alternative method, and this is sort of what I saw in Rails development, is that you have people sort of stitch together 10 or 15 separate libraries, sort of best of breed, that do micro things, and you try and pull them into a macro framework yourself. Generally, that's it's kind of a more of an artisan approach. It means that